And we're back, and it's COMP2007, summer 2016, and it's week 1, lesson 1, part 2 of our broadcast. It's hot in here, for sure. We covered, before the break, we covered how to put together a very simple one-page little app. We're going to mix this up. We're going to change this. I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint presentation at this point, just to make sure we cover all the stuff we have to cover for today, which there's a lot of it, right, believe it or not. Remember, each week we cover 2 chapters, right, from the book. So if you want to write, yeah, it's pretty heavy duty. So if you want to read ahead, you can always read the book. It's Murex, ASP.NET 4.5 with C# and Visual Studio 2012 or something. So we're going to be covering chapter 1 and 2 today from the book. One of the things we talked about last time was this idea of the internet. Now, I'm not going to go through it again, like as if you've never seen the internet before, right? It's here as a reference card if you want to look at it, but I'm not going to go and tell you, smartphones, tablets, computers that connect to this thing that's called the cloud, right? I'm going to do that. Or if you don't know what a URL is and how it's broken out, right, you should really go and do some of your own learnings and then come back, right? One thing to note, though, is point 2, this is point number 2, which is what I talked about earlier, which is important. Index.html, index.htm, default.html, default.html, default.aspx, index.aspx. That's acceptable as names to start off your project, right? That's those start files. But any other weird names, unless otherwise specified, will not work. So please don't use them. The idea of request response we covered actually in COMP2007, right? We talked about in advanced web programming. We covered the idea that you send a response to the request to the server, it processes the request, routes it to the right files, and then sends back your rendered HTML from the place that you keep all your files on the server, right? Request does its magic, response. And this doesn't really change for a static web page. It's the same as how we use things with our quote unquote dynamic web page. I hate that word dynamic because it doesn't really mean what it means, what it used to mean. So the web browser, again, goes out, does a request, but this time the IIS server, which, by the way, if I was going to do an analog with IIS would be the same as Apache, right? Or the same as Node. That's in the same slot. This is your stack. This is your development stack from Microsoft. Microsoft has IIS, ASP.NET, and some kind of backend server, most likely SQL, right? That's the development stack for Microsoft. Node, right? It has Node, Mongo, right? And on the database, Node. The application server could be whatever you want to make it, Express as an example, and then on the back end database Mongo, right? This for part of the mean stack, right? And for Apache, right? PHP and MySQL, right? Same kind of idea. The AMP stack, so to speak. That's what these pieces. Still a 3-tier architecture when it comes to the stack. But what happens here with ASP.NET and IIS, it goes out, the request goes out, it goes through your application server, retrieves stuff from the database, comes back through your application server, where it does more logic, back through the actual, to do the routing, it routes everything and renders your page and comes back out to the browser. So this thing is called the round trip. And it's going to keep on doing these round trips every single time there's an event on the page, like the page load event or the button click event, right? Those 2 events create this round trip, which is not efficient. But we need to learn that this is what happens. The page is at the beginning. Okay, I'm not going to read about this stuff. This is all about databases and how pages are processed and so on. You can certainly use this as a reference card, but I will not discuss it. Okay, web forms, again, created back in 2002. You need to know a little bit of history, and I'm not going to really test you on this, by the way. I'm not going to say, by the way, when were web forms created? 2002, 2003, 2004. 2002. One thing that you need to know is that back in the day, there was something called classic ASP or active server pages that were very similar to PHP. They acted the same way, the same kind of syntax almost, like the less than percent greater than, that created that almost like that data binding event, right? That PHP does and so on, right? That is where ASP.NET web forms came out of, and the same thing with MVC came from that, right? One thing also to note is this penetration idea. I talked about this before earlier, which is it's got a lot of penetration out there in the marketplace. There's still 70 to 80% of people who use ASP.NET Framework, or the .NET Framework, is what they call it now, uses web forms, right? So that's why we need to learn web forms, because otherwise it's not really good. And it's also part of this whole idea of rapid application development. To create websites quick, which you can, if you saw. I mean, I'm rocking and rolling. I'm already there. I can pretty much, you know, post this stuff up and you'll have a website in no time. ASP.NET MVC is where we're going, right? Again, it talks about this whole model view controller idea, and we've talked about model view controller in COMP2007, the separation of concerns, where we want to kind of separate the model, how it connects to the database, from the view, the presentation layer, and the controller, the logic. But, you know, even that is changing over you know, as we move towards being a more efficient and progressive web. You know, take a look at Angular 1.5. Angular 1.5 is moving away from model view controller, and they're going with a component model, right? And the component model is something that, if you want to move to Angular 2, that's where it's going. It's going towards, you know, no more controllers, just components. And the component model idea is penetrating even to, you know, to .NET, the .NET framework with .NET Core, right? You're going to see how they're going to start using the component framework as well. One of the great things is that Microsoft has learned from C# and you know, Microsoft.NET MVC and incorporated it into technologies like JavaScript with TypeScript, right? That's what they've been doing, right? So, and of course, they're working in collaboration with Google to create that Angular 2. MVC, definitely a newer technology. One thing we talked about is separation of concerns. The other one is unit testing, which is, I'll be honest with you, I will be trying to incorporate this into our course. Unit testing is kind of on the road to doing test-driven development, and test-driven development is important because it's not a newer concept necessarily, but it's something that you know, we want to start doing so that we can create more efficient, more compact code without code replication, so we can use more code. Code reuse is what we want to get to, right? And we can do that when we start from a testing perspective in mind, as opposed to, okay, let's write a method and then test it. Right? We work the other way. We start the test first. What do I want? I want this. And then I write the method based on the test, right? On the requirement. I write the requirement, I make the method. And we're going to talk about that more in MVC. Again, I think one thing to note about this is the components of the .NET Framework mirror the stuff we did in RAD, Rapid Application Development, where we have the common language runtime, where the same kind of things, like the class libraries and the CLR, are the exact same across C#, across VB, C++, whatever. It's all the same. They also talk about this other layer called the type layer, the type system. The common type system is the exact same types. So string, double, you know, integer, and so on. Those are the same types that we're going to be using with C# and ASP.NET Web Forms, right? So that's something that Microsoft does across all of its technologies, which is really cool, right? And one of the things we talked about, I kind of just mentioned it, state and stateless, you know, functionality. State refers to the status of properties, variables, objects on the form, right? And normally HTTP is stateless, but in this particular case with web forms, by default, it has state. And we keep track of different kinds of states. For example, session state when people log in, right? As well as application state, and so on. We're going to be talking about these in more detail as we move forward, but for now, I want you to understand that we use state, we maintain state. We almost like maintain a connection to the back end for the life of the application, unless otherwise specified. That's the default, right? So it's a different way of thinking. It's not two-way data binding, but we're bound to the back end all the time, all right? Talk about the code behind file, which is really the C#. Again, there's two ways of doing this. You could use VB, don't recommend, right? I mean, it's there. Doesn't mean that you should use it. C# is the way to go. It's the technology that we're using more often. Two other things is, right now, our app code folder and app data folder don't exist. But if I was going to scaffold out a web forms application with that web forms template that you saw at the beginning as an option, it would have an app code or app data folder. App data hold the files for the databases, app code for other classes and other objects we want to add in there. You would have those in your scaffold. Right now we don't need them, so they're not there. Okay, those are common files you'll see with a web forms application. And we talked also about, this is again, like I will talk to you about this directive, this page directive, right? Which talks about these 4 attributes, the language, the auto wire up, the code behind, and the inherits. Now I've talked about it 3 times, right? And so that means there's a good chance you're going to see it on your quiz, right? Also, the idea of run at, that we talked about already. I already covered this stuff, but it's here in all of its glory on the PowerPoint. I'm going to stop here for the PowerPoint. There's other stuff we can cover that I've covered most of chapter 1 and 2. Let's go into another demo. Here's what I want to do, and I want you to help me out. I want to create a website that I put in my first name, my last name, my age. I want to click on a button, right? And it's going to take that information and populate it in the same page. Similar to what we did with two-way data binding in Angular, but it's not two-way data binding. Goes out, comes back, goes out, comes back, right? It's going to look the same, but it's going to have that property. How do I do that? Well, first things first. This isn't a CSS course, like I talked about before. We're going to be using Bootstrap. So how do I do that? Well, before, remember, we used the package manager built in Bower or npm for Bootstrap, right? Here we're going to use NuGet, and I'm going to right-click on the solution. So do this with me, and I'm going to do Manage NuGet Packages for Solution, right? And when I do that, it's going to bring up the installed packages right now. Now, if you have the version that I have, so if you have Visual Studio 2015 Update 2, you'll see this. And the NuGet Package Manager should be updated as well. Manages. If you don't have this, you won't have this additional information here. So these are the packages that I have installed. And notice that they need an update. I'm not going to update them right now. I want to browse for additional packages, and I want to get Bootstrap. So I'm going to click on Bootstrap. Normally, if you're using Visual Studio 2013, you'll just have an install button here. But I got to choose the project that I want to apply my Bootstrap to, and then click Install. So it's going to go up to the web like we normally do. It's going to grab the dependencies, jQuery, as well as Bootstrap, and then install them inside my package, right? Well, that was really hard. That's done. And yeah, as you can see how easy that is compared to the way we did it before, right? That's way easier. And you know what? I really like Font Awesome because it's this font that I want to use. I'm going to type Font Awesome. I'm going to go up to the web, and there's this one here, Font Awesome by Dave Gandy, and this is version 4.6.1. That's the one I want, and I want to click that and install that one too. So I'm going to go out there, grab Font Awesome, and clickety-click, Barbara trick, we have it. Next. That's how fast Package Manager is, right? That's why, like I told you, this piece, ASP.NET Web Forms, easier than me, right? Let's update my files. There's 3 updates, right? And if you're using Visual Studio 2015 with VS Web Essentials, you'll see that for my updates, I have these 3 updates. jQuery, which right now is can go to 2.2.3. A couple of Microsoft built-in compiler and .NET compiler platforms, right? And I can update them all by clicking this and clicking Update. And what this does is it goes up to the web and updates my installed packages to the latest version, right? So you can go out there, update, come back. And when it's done, that's done. So now I'm up to date. Okay, I can close off the NuGet Manager. Yay, I've got everything. Hey, take a look. I've got my assets. I've got my content. There's all my content. I've got my CSS. Hey, that's weird. How come CSS and fonts came in a different folder? Well, that's how Microsoft sets them up for Visual Studio Web Forms, right? And later versions for MVC, you'll see everything inside content. Okay, so what do I do now? I want to include a Bootstrap. I want to include Font Awesome. How do I do that? Well, drag and drop. So I go into Content. I grab bootstrap.min.css, and I drag it next to the title, and there it is. That was hard. I don't have to even worry about the pathing. I do have to worry about this for some reason, right? And you know what? Let's talk about other things. Let's get the rest. Let's get bootstrap-theme.min.css. I want to grab that. And you know what? I want to get Font Awesome. That's in the CSS folder right now. Here it is. I want to grab fontawesome.min.css. So drag that in there too. That was hard, right? And that's what I'm saying. Microsoft has its advantages. 80 million lines of code. It's a big monster beast, right? But it has everything. I'm going to put in a little comment. that says this is my CSS section. You guys have seen this before, right? And now what I need to do is on the bottom, I need to put in my JavaScript because Bootstrap doesn't work properly without JavaScript and jQuery. So here's my JavaScript section. So I can still have JavaScript because I have front-end functionality I want to add in. You can still do that, right? So I want to kind of grab my JavaScript, go in the scripts folder, go and grab my jQuery-2.2.3.min.js and drag that in here. And I'm going to drag my bootstrap.min.js and drag that in there. Done. So now my file is complete when it comes to all the stuff that I got from Bootstrap, right, and jQuery. Now, remember how this was, how long it took us to do this with open source tools, MeanStack. We had to create the file by hand, go out there, grab stuff, use Bower. Eventually, we had to use other things to do it. You know, it was quite challenging to do, and this is all in one little package here. Yes. It generates automatically when I download and install Bootstrap and FontAwesome. And I did that by doing right-click, manage NuGet packages for solution. Yeah. It'll come from me. I didn't do anything different. I didn't add it in, I swear. I did it automatically. For you too? Just do it? Huh? Did it or no?
No, I'm actually.
Bootstrap? Version of 2015 or whatever it is that you're using. Okay, so so this is all set up and ready to go. One thing I need to do is I want to start using Bootstrap, right? And I want to do a couple things. I want to have a nav bar, and I want to have Bootstrap set up so it uses Bootstrap classes for my form. So how do I do that? Let me just zoom in here for a second so you can see a little bit more. I'm going to add my Bootstrap in there, and here's where my shorthand is going to come in. If you have Visual Studio Web Essentials installed, you should be able to do something like this, just like we did with Emmett. We typed like this, div, dot, and container, right? And then inside my container, I have another div tag with a class of row, right? And inside that, I have a div tag with a class of column, middle or mid, offset, 3, column, MD, right? 6, and then tab. And I get all that. Now you can't do that unless you have Visual Studio Web Essentials installed, or if you use Emmet. If you remember before, we had that's why I tell you, get Visual Studio Web Essentials. It helps, right? If you're using a computer in front of you, you won't have it, right? So you have to type it all in by hand. So what am I doing here? I'm saying make a container for Bootstrap, add a row, because remember Bootstrap uses this whole hierarchy of a 12-column grid, right? And what I want to do here is I'm saying, hey, give me 3 columns as an offset to the left. So I want to have 3 columns, 1, 2, 3, and then I want to do 6 columns where I'm going to house my form, right? Each column is roughly 8%, right? So that's about 24% of an offset plus another 48%, almost 50% of my contents in the middle. Oh, this is happening right here. Okay, cool. So here's where I want to put all this stuff. So I'm going to take this, cut it, I'll put it over here, and it's ugly, right? So I'm going to select everything, right-click, and format selection, which is going to nicely space everything out. Okay, cool. So I've got this. I've got my container and everything else. So I've got my label. Let's kill this stuff in the middle. I want to put my stuff in here again for the first time, right? I'm going to have a problem, though, right? What would be my problem if I ran my application now? Would I have a problem? Huh? A page load event is going to be looking for my button. Doesn't exist, right? And it's also going to be looking for my label that doesn't exist, right? So that's going to be a problem. We're going to fix that later on. Let's continue to work, and then I'll fix my ASP.NET CS file. Okay. Let's make some stuff here happen. There we go. So my container, my row, my column offset. And what I want to do for this div tag is I want to put a class of form group, right? Form group groups it up. I also want to put for my form, I want to put a class for me. We'll do this later on of form. We don't need that right now, just form, not form control. Notice that it does pick up my Bootstrap classes automatically in Visual Studio 2015. It's built in, right? And now I also have Visual Studio Web Essentials that helps me, as well as the Bootstrap snippet pack that I talked about earlier, right? So, okay, so I've got this, my form group, and I want to add in 2 controls. Let's do it by hand again. So it's going to be ASP label, right? I'm going to press tab. It creates my label for me, right? I need an ID for the label, capital ID, and we're going to make it that it's going to be called my first name label. So I want to have first name, last name, right? And I want to have my age, right? And a button. So here's first name label, right? My text is going to be first name. I'm not going to assign a class to this because labels don't get classes. And now I'm going to put in a text box, right? That's what the ASP control is, right? ASP text box. And then there it is, run that server. And what I got to have in here again is an ID for the text box, which is the first name text box, right? I don't want a text value right now. I want it to be empty, and this is enough. Okay. I do need a class though, and what if I put class in here? What is class referred to in ASP.NET web forms? Yeah, well, yeah, it's not the CSS class. You have to put in CSS class. That's what you do. You go CSS class. And that means it's a CSS class, not a class as in C# class. Be very careful. That's the difference here with the web control. My CSS class is form control and enter. Okay, cool. So I've got my first form control, right? I've got my first name and some kind of space to put it in. Let's preview this thing and see what it looks like now by pressing Control F5, right? Where we run without debugging. And let's see if it gives us that error that we talked about, right? Hey, there's build errors, right? This is what I want to see. And there's build errors because if you go back, it says, it's going to tell us our error. It says the resource server in / application I found. This is not the right error, but it's okay. What it really means is, hey, Tom, something's wrong. Let me go back there and rerun my Visual Studio 2015. Something's wrong with your application. My backend is missing my C# file. My C# file has my button. It's referring to that, and it's gone. I deleted my button. And it's also looking for my hello label. That's gone. So it's giving me an error. And I'm going to go back there and fix it. And of course, she gone. I don't even know where that is, right? But I love it. I love it, I said. I love it. So let's see if I can open recent projects and solutions. Wow, that was fantastic, that reboot of mine, right? I don't know what happened there. But we'll find out where it is. So, hey, this is a good question. Where are your stuff stored, right? Well, normally what happens is they're stored in a specific location. Luckily for me, I've got them in a specific place. Take a look at this. Recent files. Yay. That's lucky. Yeah, the answer is never panic. There's always a way to get your stuff back, right? It's just, you know, we have to deal with the delinquencies of the system, right? We're back. Let's take a look at this thing and see if we've got problems. And where are these build problems anyway? Well, they're here, right? Under this, there is no hello label text. Did I save this thing? Oh, I did. Yeah, I did. See, there's no hello label text, and there's no hello label world, you know, whatever at all. Let's get rid of this in my ASP.NET, the CS file, and let's get rid of this. In fact, let's get rid of all this because we don't have a submit button at all. And let's click save, and let's run it again without debugging. Control F5. Let's see if it'll run this time without crashing my Visual Studio. John, I think it's all your fault. Just gotta blame somebody. All right. See, I told you, it was Lucy and Cindy last time. Now you're in front of me. That's it. Hey, it worked. Look, here's my label. It has that little bit of space here, that column offset plus this. Right? Oh, it even remembers. So this is good. We're successful with this piece. Let's continue with this to build the rest of it. So going back to my default ASP application, I want to take my form, go here into my form group, right? Copy this whole piece right here, oh man, is it going to mess up? Because if I paste it, oh no, it didn't. Look what happened. It changed from first name label to label 1, right? Here it is, right? Here's label 1. I'm going to rename this thing to last name label. Last name label. You don't have to, but I will. Change this to last name. My form control for my text box, it's not text box 1, it's last name text box. That's good. Let's continue. Let's continue. I also want to have another one. Here's another one. And it's going to be age, right? So this is my age label. And this one here is going to be age text box. Notice how I put the name of the control, just like you should have done in Windows Forms. Right? Maybe you were told in Windows Forms to put the control type in your variable name. That's what I'm doing. I'm keeping the same pattern that we do it when we program it. So age text box, we know what it is. Age label, yes. There is no type. Right now, all labels, everything we get from the web, everything we get from Windows Forms, they're all strings. Everything we get, we have to parse the string and then deal with it afterwards. That's how it happens. So we get a string, we convert it to integer, and then we do something with variables in the background, right? Now, we can certainly do it other ways. That's a very good question, but we'll talk about it after. Let's continue with this example. So we got our age, our first name and last name. Let's get our button going, eh? Here's our button. So we'll say, here's my ASP. Let's try this by hand. Again, button, right? Tab, and we need an ID for the button. And the ID for the button is going to be, again, my submit button. And the submit button is going to have some text in there that's going to say submit. Okay. Okay, this is it. And we want to style the button a little bit because, the button will come out gray. We want to make it so that it's using Bootstrap. So it's going to be CSS class. And the button is going to be called button-primary. So blue button. That's what it's going to give us, right? I'm going to put this there so you can see it. Button primary. So button primary is a CSS class that comes from Bootstrap that tells us the button is going to be styled with rounded corners and it's going to be blue. Any other Bootstrap theme or template that you want when you create stuff, even stuff from a CDN. Right? We don't have to download and install Bootstrap with NuGet, right? You can get that from a CDN just like you can with jQuery and so on. But it's nice to work locally as well. This out. So I'm gonna save everything and I'm gonna say Control F5, run without debugging, and let's see what it looks like now, right, with my little app that I'm making. Remember how fast this is, right? Click, 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 click. Gets added in. We've got a form control, right? Let's see what it works. So if I say Tom, right, and my last name, right, you can put your stuff in there. My age, no, it's not, and then submit. What happens here when I click submit? It's not going anywhere, but something happened. What's really happened? I've taken my form, I've gone out to the server, and I've done a round trip. When I click submit, even though nothing's wired up, and I still can't do this, right? Because that's a no-no. You can't do it. I have state, right? I'm maintaining state here, right? So this is something that's happening. Okay, cool. My first name, my last name, and eventually my age, and put it on the bottom inside another form control inside the same page. So how do I do that? Okay, so I need to kind of go here underneath the button. For this demonstration, let's use a line break and some kind of horizontal rule that we're going to put in just for now. And what I want to do is I want to take this form group here, right, for the first one, copy it and put it in here. Here's our form group. And this one obviously is not going to be called label. It's going to be called, and it's not going to be age. It's going to be the full name label, right? Because my full name label is going to be here, and this is going to say full name, And form control is good. My D can't be text box. It's going to be full name text box. There we are. what I want to do is I want to take my name, first name, last name, and eventually my age, not right now, and put it together to make my full name. First name, last name, make my full name in the same page. How do I do that? I need a button. Well, my button's here. I need to add an event. And again, there's a couple ways to do this event. I can go to properties and, oh man, hey, where's my, how come with my button this time, my properties, here it is, I don't have my, my little thing here, my lightning bolt. It's not there. Don't despair, right, is the answer. There's other ways to get it, right? If you go to design, it doesn't represent what I'm doing, but if I look at my button, click on my button one time, I get my lightning bolt back, right? I click on my lightning bolt and double click on the click event, right? It creates that submit button event, okay? My submit button click event. In here, what do I want to do? I want to take the value from my first name label, or first name text box, and the value from my last name text box, smash them together to make my last name, or my full name in it. So how do I do that? I say this, full name text box dot text is equal to what? Come on. First name text box, I know. It sounds like it's not rocket science, eh? Dot text. Okay, here's what I don't recommend. Don't keep going. Dot text dot toString, I recommend. Don't need it, but do it anyway. Trust me, right? And then plus some kind of space, right? Plus last name text box. I mean, what's happening here? How come? Oh, because the plus, right? Last name text box dot text dot toString, right? Big long line, but that's what I want, right? Because it's taking those two things, smash them together to make my full name text box dot text. Yay. Why am I doing toString? I'm guaranteeing what I'm getting back is a string for whatever reason. Okay, I don't know. You can never rely on anything come back, even though I'm telling you it's a string. Convert it anyway. All right. Okay. Now that I got that coming back, I'm going to save this. Going back to my source code here. Save this. And when I do that, let's test it. So we're going to run this full test now with debugging. Lucy, you're dying. It's not my fault, I swear. All right. Okay. Patels, we're good. Thank you. Anyone else over there? People in the corner, way back in the end. You're good? You're following along? Over there, you're good? Yeah, good. Okay. Let's try this out. So I'll say Tom and my last name, and we'll say my age, and we'll say submit, and Tom. Right? We're good. That's it's not two-way data binding. It's not. Don't think of it like that. It goes back, and it's going to go back actually twice already because it's done it for the page load event, and it's doing it for my button. All right. Now this is good, but it's not really that great. I need some kind of title for this on the top, and maybe a nav bar. Right. So let's do this nav bar thing. So I'm going to go back out, stop this, and stop this, and looks like there's a lot of stuff in here, but really it's not. Right? It's not a lot of stuff. I want to put my nav bar up here, right? And I want to put the name of my what's happening. I don't know, like user profile or something like that. Before my form, but inside my column offset column MD6, so it stays in that little box that I've created, right? So I want to say something like this: an H1 tag with something like user profile. I want to put that in there. Oh. That's my user profile. And then what I want to do is I want to create my nav bar up here. I'm not going to use my snippet. I'm not going to use my snippet. I'm not going to use my snippet. I have a snippet for this, but I won't use it. I'm going to do it the long way. Let's do it the long way. Right? I'm going to go to getbootstrap.com. Right? By the way, I also have a code pen I can grab from there too. I also have a gist on GitHub. I can grab that too. I'm not going to do it, I swear. Right? I'm going to go here to my components, and I'm going to scroll down to where it says nav or navbar. Right underneath navbar, I have this big long navbar. I want to use this one, copy. Right, and just like we did last time, I'm going to go back into my What the? I can't run two of these at the same time. It'll kill me. I'm going to run into this one and right-click and paste. There we go. Whoa, that's a big nav bar. Lots of little text. And I don't need all of it. These three icon bars are the hamburger that comes up, right? Remember we talked about this? I've got my brand. I'm going to call this ASP.NET Web Forms. Right, that's what my brand is going to be. In here, I don't need my first UL. So on line 30 here, I'm getting rid of my first UL all the way down to where below the form, right to the end of the form here. I'm going to get rid of all this. Okay, get rid of all this. And then I have my other UL here that I'm going to use. And I don't need this drop-down list item. So this drop-down list item can go away. Bye-bye. But I do have this link here, and I'm going to duplicate this link 4 more times. So copy, paste, 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 paste. And this one will be home. I'll fix it in a second. Right? Products, you guys know this. Services. You guys can be sick with this, right? About us. And contact us. There it is. Contact us. Little page, right? And you know what? For my list item, for my first one, I'm going to make it so that it is a class, regular class now, because we're not doing ASP.NET web forms. I can use regular HTML here, a class of active, right? Just like we did before. And you know what? We should test this out now to see what it looks like, because who knows, right? Let's test it out. And I'm going to run this without debugging. Control F5. And if everything works well, we're starting to get the look and feel of our site, right? This is good. Okay, cool. I don't like it white like this. I want to make it black. What's the code for that? Nav bar inverse. I love it, but people know that. That's how it should be. It's nice and simple. Inverse, right? Nav bar inverse for black, right? This is good, and I want to add font awesome because you know we have our font awesome. Let's add that in. So I'm going to put that into my links here, and then I'll reformat everything. So down here I'm going to put an I tag class of FA, right, and then FA-home, right, and then FA-LG large. I want to make a large icon with an icon of home, right? So there it is. And I'm going to take this, just reformat everything. So I'm going to put this over here, and my home, I'm going to copy this over here, give it a bit of a space between the icon and the home. And what I'm going to do is copy this icon right here, which is coming from Font Awesome. I'm going to put it in front of the products, services, about us, contact us. And what I want to do is I want to change from home, from my products, I want to use TH, which is like a little grid. I want to use, for my services, I'm going to use the gear icon. For my About Us page, I'm going to use the info icon. For my home page, I'm going to use the phone icon. And clickety-click, Barbara Trick, I should have a pretty slick little website coming along, right? With very little work, right? Okay, so getting there, right? Does everyone have this? Okay. I don't go back, man. I'm joking, man. I go back. I swear, I'll go back. All right, so here's the little nav bar that I put in. It's hard to see it all. I'm just going to kind of zoom out a little bit. Oops, the other way. All I've done here is, and I'm just going to kind of Control A for all and reformat this thing so it works better. So format selection. So here on the top, I've got my nav bar. There it is. And what I'm going to do just for clarity is I'm going to take this data-toggle and put it on the next line. It's not going to hurt anything to do this. I'm just going to do it like this so you can see everything in one page. Okay, and then I can see a little bigger than that. There we go. So what I've done here is I've gone out, grabbed the standard nav bar from Bootstrap, and I put it in my page at the top. Now you might say, whoa, I have to do this every single time. And next week we're going to be talking about master server pages, right? Where I don't have to do this more than once. I'll have one master server page, And then I'll have templates and partials, and I'll load the content just like we did with EJS, with COMP2068, and we'll be off and running. I can make multiple pages with my template. Okay, nice and easy. It's important to know how to do this from scratch like we're doing it, so when you see a page that's been scaffolded out by Microsoft, right, you understand where all the components are and what they all mean. Otherwise, it's just a mess, right? It's like any scaffold. Remember how we used to try and decipher the Express generator scaffold key? When we generated everything with Express in COMP2068 Advanced Web Programming, it was a pain in the ass. We didn't know what was happening, right? Then eventually we got to understand what the scaffold did, right? We're going to do the same thing with our other scaffold here. Okay, cool. So we've got this nav bar. I think people that are watching online can actually do this now because you've seen it. Here's my container that I have for my other piece, right? So you see this. This is the whole code now, right? And here's what I got left in the on the C# side. There's nothing to it really. At the end of the day, it's really one line of code that does everything, right? Of course, you could add more functionality here. We're just really scratching the surface. Okay, cool. This is the first step. What I want to do is I want to put this up on GitHub, and I want to populate it on Azure, and I want it to auto-deploy from Azure, from GitHub to Azure, like we've done many times. Let's do this thing, right? So the first thing is, we'll do it the long way. We're going to go up on GitHub, and I'm going to go to create a new repository here. And of course, I'm going to do it on the Georgian College site here. I'm going to say COMP 2007, and we're going to say, you know, summer 2016. Hey, look at that. I already have 1A. That's what I'm going to call this one, 1B, right? There we go. And create my repository. There it is. So I've got my repository up on GitHub, Georgian College. I'm going to copy this URI right here. Okay, on GitHub, copy the URI. And then I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, I want to bring up Team Explorer. I'm going to pin it. Now, your Team Explorer is going to be similar to this. The one thing to do if you've not set up Team Explorer for the first time is click on Settings. Okay, click Settings. Click on Global Settings. And in Global Settings, you need to set up your information here. That means your name, your email address, and all that stuff. It's got to be here, or else you won't be able to do a commit. Okay? Now that that's done, I've put in all my details. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes. Note that this is going to look different for you in Visual Studio 2013. It's just going to show a bunch of files with some kind of commit message, right? Notice there's a lot of files here, right? Nothing is excluded. I want to, in 2015, I can do this. I can just click this plus button, and it's going to send everything to the staging area. So now these are all staged changes, 32 stage changes, which is very handy, right? And I'm going to call this, for the first time, initial commit. And then I'm going to say commit staged. Yay, it's staged. Done. So I've done my first commit. Everything is beautiful, but we're not connected to a remote. How do I do that? Home. This is, again, in Team Explorer. Sync. Now, in Visual Studio 2015, I have some beautiful options. I have this Team Services, which I could use. I'm not going to. I also have GitHub built in because I've downloaded those little pieces, GitHub for Visual Studio. And if I click Get Started, you can see that it's going to go to the one, it even finds my repo right away, right? And I could click Publish here, but I'm not going to do that because if you're using Visual Studio 2013, it won't show you that option. Let's do it the hard way. I'm going to go here to Publish to Remote Repository, click Get Started, and it's going to give you this yellow search bar, which is similar to what you see in Visual Studio 2013. You right-click and paste your URI and click Publish. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, it's going to come up with a message that says, please log in, GitHub credentials. But what it's done that for the first time, now GitHub is set up. And if I go and check it, and if I refresh, you can see that GitHub has my files up online, right? Cool. One part of your lab is done, right? First part of your lab. Here's the second part of your lab, all right? Well, first of all, let's do a couple checks here. Notice how much additional things we have here in Visual Studio 2015. This is all new. I can do a pull request. I can do, I can select an issue. I can create an issue. I also have some information here at the bottom, right, of what my repository is. Here's my repository. Here's my branch, the master branch. Down here, how many changes I've made, if any, and do I have anything to publish? No, right? Let's make some changes, right? So I've got some stuff I want to change in my site. Like, for example, let's add my name somewhere in here, like, you know, author name. By the way, you can make it a meta tag too if I wanted to, but I'm just going to make it a, maybe I should do it properly, right? Author name. No, so I've added a little comment. It's generated another change. Here's the change, 3 changes. I'm going to stage the changes. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say updated defaults.aspx, right? And click commit staged. And now if I go home, and if I go to sync, I can push. And nothing, there's no command line, it's done, right? That's how beautiful Visual Studio is when it comes to GitHub, if you've downloaded the right tools. Visual Studio 2015 with the GitHub extension. I'll show you that one again. So if I go to Tools, Extensions and Updates, I've got my Bootstrap snippet pack. I'll show you this again. And I also have, which is important to see, Web Essentials 2015 for Update 2, right, which is important, as well as the NuGet Package Manager for Visual Studio 2015. Don't worry, this is all being recorded for people who are trying to rush to get it all done. And of course, GitHub extension for Visual Studio. Those are the things that give me all those extra functionality. And as well, my Visual Studio is version 2015 with Update 2. Okay, so now that I've got all that, that's good. Let's set up an Azure account or an Azure link. So I'm going to go here, and I need to go to Azure. Here's my dashboard, and I'm going to go to New. And you've seen this before. If you haven't, this is you just sort of review web and mobile. We're going to go web app. I'm going to enter a new name, so COMP2007, summer 2016. Lesson 1B, right? So we know which one it is, right? I'm going to pin this to the dashboard. I'm going to choose a resource group that I already have, which is East US. I recommend East US, something that's free. If you don't choose East Asia it'll kill your account. Click Create. And now it's going to do its deployment dance here on Azure. So it's going to go out, create a container, my web container, but it's going to be a empty web container, like I talked about before, right? Now, for people that were here a couple of semesters ago, this might be just a review. This is how you do it. I'm going out to Azure, creating my container, and when this is done, I'm going to do a deployment right from GitHub into Azure, like we've done before. Okay, my container is done creating. I'm going to wait till this is all finished updating. Notice it's not finished updating yet because I have all this extra stuff. As I scroll down, I go to Publishing, and if I go to Deployment Source, take a look, I can choose, if it's not for the first time, if this is your first time, it's going to give you a request to approve. I'm going to choose GitHub. By the way, you can choose Visual Studio Team Services, OneDrive, your local Git repository, and so on. I'm going to choose GitHub. And then after GitHub, it's going to ask me which organization. I'm going to choose Georgian. Yours is just going to be you, right? And then under Project, I'm going to choose the project that I just made, which is Lesson 1B. And I'm going to leave it at the master branch with no testing configured and click OK. Now remember, we have a problem, right? What's the problem that I have, potentially? I'll let this thing do its dance, and I'll come back over here so you can see the problem. Do you see an index.html, a default.html, or default.html, index.html, index.aspx, the default? Do you see any of that in here? No, my actual stuff is inside this other folder right here. That's a big problem, right, for most times, right? Because my folder, all my stuff that should be exposed is here. Notice how, by the way, I'm going to make this a little bigger for you guys to see. Notice how that you can see that the default ASPX and the default ASPX.cs are both separate up on GitHub. That's okay, right? These are separate things. But they're inside of another file. They're inside of another folder called the same name, right? That's normal for Microsoft projects, right? Did it deploy? It did on Azure, right? Let's see if it actually worked. If I click this, Maybe it might fail, right? It might give me an unauthorized because, you know, but it's Microsoft. Microsoft talks to each other very nice, right? So it understands solutions, right? And it does one of these. So this is your lab, right? Lab 1 is really GitHub, Azure, my little project that I just made that does this. This is what I want to see on your submission details for Lab 1. Give me this back. It's got to have your name on it, please, inside your project somewhere that says it's me, right? So it's not. Don't give me back my work. I can tell, please. You know, make it your own. And I want it just like this. I want to. Now there's some problems here. Look what I have. I have a couple problems here. What's the problem here? If I refresh. Here, look at this. I haven't submitted. If I submit, right? If I do like Tom. Hold on a second. Tom Jones. There we go. Tom Jones. My name is not Tom Theopoulos anymore, and I'm 18 years old. I'm an 18-year-old Tom Jones, right? Click this. I tested it, but you know this is okay. But look how close my icons are here. Is that right? Let's go back and check it. There's always some issues with Microsoft when it comes down to it, right? Do I have a problem with my icons? Is it their fault or my fault? It's my fault, right? And if you see this as an example, you can see when I formatted. Just be careful when you format your code. It took the space out, right? And that's a problem. So I want to put my spaces back in there. Oops. I want to put my spaces back in between the I and home. There we go. There we go. And save. Oh man, I just saved everything. It's a new change. I'm going to go back to my Team Explorer. You're going to see my Team Explorer update. We talked about continuous deployment. Here it is, right? So I want to change my GitHub, right? And if everything goes well, it should auto deploy, right? It should auto deploy right back. If I go to changes, here's my changes. I'm going to add them to the staging area, and I'm going to say updated defaults.aspx file to beautify icons, right? So when it's staged, right? There we go, little thing. And then I'm going to go home, and I'm going to go to sync, and I'm going to push. And it's going to go up, push everything up there. Now that I've done that, I'm going to look at Microsoft and see what's going on there. Did it pick up my change? Not yet. Wait for it. Microsoft, because I've chosen a deployment source, just like before, for people who have forgotten or from last semester, you'll know. Look what it did. It actually picked up the change in GitHub, and now it's going to auto-deploy my changes right back up to my website to here. Now, I can't refresh because of state. Can't do that. I've got to cut this down for now and go back to that site again. And the reason for that is because I'm maintaining state. In the future, we're not going to do that for every site. And this is the way you're going to fix it, just to go back out to the site again. Okay. Now you can see that the icons are spaced out a little bit more. It looks a little nicer for that one little change, right? Questions for Lab 1? Okay, we're not done. Remember what I said. I wanted to have two parts to this thing, and we do have two parts. If I was to look up online, I see that there's age. We're not doing anything with age. And you know what? I can put in like single characters. I can put in this. I can leave last name out. I can put an age of -1, and I can still click submit, and it would work. That doesn't make any sense, right? I want to add some simple validation to the page. You can also validate on the front end, right? You can validate with HTML tools, because HTML5 now gives additional validation features. It didn't have them before. Let's unclip this for a second. What I mean by that is down here when we're in the form, we could add required, right, in my text box. So I could say something like down here, required. But I recommend you put equals to true for ASP.NET. You don't have to normally put required is equal to true. You can just put required. Required is true is a little bit more compatible with this. Leave it like that. And I'm going to put this in here. And also, I definitely want to make this required for my age. And the button doesn't have to be required. Okay. So that's simple validation. Okay, that's one piece. Oh, we made a change. Let's go to my Solution Explorer, or my Team Explorer, sorry, and go to Home, so you can see yet again, go to Changes. I'm going to click this on the staging area. Again, this is unique to Visual Studio 2015, right? And I'm going to say, added HTML5 required attribute to form, right? And it's staged, and then I'm going to go home, I'm going to go to sync, and I'm going to click on push. And now you've seen it. If you watch the video, you're going to see this over and over again, me doing it, right? So it's an example of how to do it right. Okay, it's pushed. Let's go back to Azure. Let's take a look. Well, first of all, we have to close this down. We can't resubmit the form because of the way we've done it. We're going to go over here. We're going to wait for it, and it's going to auto-deploy the next push that I did, my next commit. All right? And when it's done, we'll have that change, right, to the form. But what I really want to do, it's done. What I really want to do is add some validation that's on the back end. We want to check to see if there's enough spaces, as an example, right? We want to see if there's enough. We don't want to have a character that's only one. I don't know any last names that only have one character typically, you know, or no characters. There's got to be a first name. There's got to be a last name. If I click Submit now, it's going to say fill out this field. That's HTML5 stuff. Very easy. But I want to add in some other additional features like my first name. If I put in a T, it's going to work. And nothing, it'll still work. Oh, well, no, it'll at least ask me for one character, and age doesn't even check if it's an integer, right? It's not validating if it's the type, like you asked, right? So there's no validation whatsoever. So how do I validate this for the right thing? Well, there's some really cool server controls you can put in, not using jQuery. You can also use jQuery and JavaScript for this. But back in the day, you got to remember, there was no JavaScript activated back in 2002 necessarily, right? So they had everything got processed on the back end. Let's fix this a little bit. Now, I detail it actually here in my PowerPoint, right? So if I go back to the PowerPoint somewhere, then in here, after page 22, you can see that I'm going to start talking about a couple things. One is how to add web forms. You can drag and drop server controls, which I talked about before. But also, there's a couple of properties that are very common, and one of them is this causes validation, right? I want to add this causes validation. I want to kind of turn it on, almost like a flag that turns on for each of the controls. So I want each of the controls to cause validation. I can do that. Or I can make the button cause validation, right? So my validation turns on, right? Let's try the button. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go back to my button. And this is where I need my properties here for a second. So let me bring back my properties. Here's my properties. And I'll kind of bring this up a little higher. And let's click on solution here for a second. So here's my properties. And I want to look at the button. My button has a bunch of properties here. If I click on the right thing here, right, notice that I could say causes validation right now. My button causes validation is on to true, right? By default, see, causes validation. Even though it doesn't show here as anything, right? What about the rest of my controls? So if I move from one control to the other and it doesn't have the right stuff, I'm talking about the right length, or it's the wrong data type, right? I don't want to accept it, right? And you can be very specific here when it comes to validation. User validation is the most difficult thing to master because the user can put in numbers for his name, right? Like a 1. That's valid. It's a string, right? So let's start this off. So I'll start off like this. So causes validation, definitely true for this one. So I'm going to put true. Notice that it adds another attribute here. Causes validation true for this one. And this one. So we got cause validation for those. Right? Inside your validation section, right? So I'm going to kind of go up here, just minimize standard. Here's my validation section, and I've got a bunch of them. I've got a regular expression validator, so I can check for exactly the type of pattern that I want. For example, I only want lowercase or uppercase, characters in my name. I can ask for that. I can ask for a capital for my name in the beginning. I can do all kinds of stuff, right? With regular expressions. I want a required field validator. that's cool, but I've got my required field handled by my HTML, so that's not going to happen. Nothing's going to stop there. But I can check my range validator. That I can do. I can say, well, my range of my date, as an example, is definitely got to be something greater than 0. Can't be 0, right? And it's going to be less than, I don't know, what's 120? I don't think people live beyond 120 right now, right? Okay, let's say 130. I'll give you 10 more years, right? You know, just to say. So it can't be that big. It can't be 500 or 1,000 or 10 million, right? It's got to be something within a reasonable range, right, for us human beings. So let's add that in. How do I add a range validator, right? And what is a range validator? Well, I want it, it's almost like a label that will appear to indicate to the user that something's wrong when a condition isn't met, right? And I want to put it in for my age. Let's just do it for my age label for now, right? You guys can put it in for the other ones. So I want to click on my toolbox. Oops. View toolbox. I feel like a robot. Okay. And I'm going to drag and drop my range validator underneath my age label. That's where I want it to be. I'm just going to unclick these so you can see a little better. There's my range validator now. It's just another control, right? I also want to look at the properties for my range validator. So let's go to my properties. I'm going to click this on. Notice that my range validator has a couple of things here, right? I could attach a CSS class to it if I had a special CSS class, either a custom class or a bootstrap class. I could add that, and we'll look for that in a second, right? I could give it a name, an ID. Right now, my ID is range validator 1, right? What I really want to do is my age validator, right? So that's what I want to make, age range validator. Makes sense? Something that makes sense. All your values should be human readable and contextual. All right. If they're not contextual and not human readable, if I see label 1, text box 1s, right, those kind of things when I look at your code, it's not good form. Please think about good form when you do your code. So range validator, date range validator. Okay, my error message is wrong too. It just says range validator, right? It should say something like this. Please enter a valid age between 1 and 130, or whatever it's going to be. So put that in there. So please enter valid age between 1 and 130. Right? That's the error message that's going to come up. Okay, cool. What about, how do I check for that? Well, I can do it with code, certainly, but it's built in. Here's the minimum, maximum value. So minimum value, I can make it so it's 1. Maximum value is 130. Run at the server, all this kind of stuff. My type is string. Here's the string type. I don't want to make it, my type shouldn't be a string. My type should be an integer. If I type in a string, it won't work. So I can do that. I can also check to see if my the number of characters are enough. That's one thing I could do with the other ones, with a range validator as well. Say the minimum amount, right, as an example. But it's not this. I can check. I can make another kind of function for that. All right. So, but for this, it's okay. One thing to note for this one is I could add a 4-color. I don't want to, but I could add a 4-color. Right now, the 4-color is red by default. That means when it comes up, when it comes up with an error, it'll show red. Should show red. Okay. Let's save everything, and let's test this out locally first before I push it up remotely. All right. So I kind of push this up. You okay?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Oh man, what's going on? How come I get this error? Well, it says I got a problem. It says control validate property age range validate cannot be blank. I'm missing something, right? I gotta indicate what my control it's pointing at to validate. It's got to validate something. Right now, I'm not asking to validate anything. Right? Let's go back and do that. So that's why we do these things, right? Press stop, and I'm going to go look at my range, and it says control to validate, which is right here. And if it's a listed control, I can pull it down, like age. Right? There's going to be another error, I know for sure, but I got to show you this stuff first to go through this with you. Now let's press play. Right? I'm doing this with you so you can do your validation as well, right? Cool. Okay. And I'm 155 and submit. Man, what am I getting this error for? It says web forms unobtrusive validation mode. I got this big error. How come I'm getting this error? This is an error that happens because I'm missing something. I'm missing something in my project to make it work. There are two ways to fix this thing. I could add a fix, so I don't care about unobtrusive validation from jQuery, because jQuery is doing my validation, by the way, right, up front, on the front end. Or I could add another reference, another package from NuGet to fix me, and that's what I'm going to do. It's listed actually here. If you look at your PowerPoint presentation, if you don't remember this stuff, right, when it comes to validation controls, I talked about how to do validation controls, right? And as you go down, there's two ways to fix it. I could install the NuGet package for jQuery validation, or I could turn off unobtrusive validation in the web.config file. This is kind of harsh, right? I mean, I could do it, but it doesn't mean, again, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. It'll work, and actually it lists the same fix in the book. Sometimes you don't want jQuery to validate everything. And back in the day when jQuery or JavaScript wasn't available, right, on all browsers, you can't guarantee it's going to be available. Some people would shut it down and do it on the back end, right, which is totally cool. So that's why they have this option. But I want to do it this way, and I want to download and install ASP.NET Script Manager jQuery. That's what I want to do. That'll fix me, all right? So let's do that. So I'm going to say da-da. All right, and I want to stop, and I want to go here to my Solution Explorer, and I want to right-click on my solution, and I want to manage NuGet packages for solution. And under Browse, I want to start typing ASP.NET, ASP.NET, right? And if you look at, if I go dot Script Manager, .jQuery, it's the first one. This one here will fix your problems when it comes to jQuery validation, right? I'm going to click on this and click Install. So what it's going to do is going to go out there, grab the package that I need. It's a special package that fixes my problem for validation with these validation controls, right? And now that I've got it, I'm going to test it locally again by running it. Now, this is all the process, and you would have said, oh my God, I'm getting an error. Tom, what happened? It's all your fault, right? It's not my fault. It's just the way it is. It's an option you have to include. When you're doing validation, there's two options for fixing it. This is one of them. Okay, let's take a look. So here it is. I've got my site. And one day when it starts to work, there it is. I'll put in my name, John Smith, with my age as -1. And then submit. Oh, look, it doesn't even let me submit. It says, man, please enter a validation. What happened here? How come my submit button got pushed over? That's not right. I don't want that to happen, right? There's got to be some CSS that comes in. And also, take a look. It's not red. I want it to be red. I want it to do something. So it kind of pushes over this one. And the reason for that is because this is just kind of sitting out here, and my button is sitting by itself, right? Let's fix this problem. We're almost there. We're almost there. If I click submit now, it won't allow me to click submit. I won't even go do a round trip. And that means if I refresh, I'll be able to refresh because I haven't gone to the server yet to connect. So the validation on the front end prevents me from doing a round trip to the server, which saves me time, right? It's what I want to do, right? It's not a negative. Okay, let's go back and do fix my problem. I'm showing you this stuff because this is the same stuff you'll run into. Okay. Notice that my age range validator is right on top of my button. It should be with my form group, right? I could make it a form control, but that would be really weird. I'm going to kind of copy this out or cut it out and put it underneath my form control for my text box. So it's going to kind of go right here. It's just an ordering thing. Okay, cool. Just going to get rid of these spaces. We go, and I'll unpin this stuff from the sidebar and save And you know what? It's not going to be red. It's not going to be red because I don't have a, it's not, my CSS class didn't work. My default didn't come up, right? So let's try this out because it didn't work. Now I could add CSS to do that, right? There it is. And if I submit, I still get the same thing. So John Smith with an age of -1, right? And if I click away now, I do get it underneath. It doesn't push my submit button anywhere, but it's not red. I want to make this red. Maybe I even want to make this red. You know, I want to be able to click those things. That's stuff you can do on the back end or even on the front end with a little bit of JavaScript, right? Where you can kind of use jQuery or JavaScript to color your stuff up so that way you create validation controls, right? Before it goes to the server. You don't want the server to validate stuff, right, until you've done your due diligence up front, you know, from a front end perspective, right? We're almost done, guys, I swear. And then I'll let you go. All right, so that's one. So how do I color that thing? Well, let's get into Bootstrap for a second. And let's see if there's any kind of validation for Bootstrap from a CSS perspective. Let's look at components first and see if there's any kind of, there's button groups, there's nav bars, there's page headers, there's alerts. I like the alerts, right? And here's some alerts here. Take a look. Here's my class alert success. I like this. And I want to do class alert danger. This is the one I want to use, right? And that'll solve my problem. It'll look nicely like this. That's what I want. Let's fix that. So I'm going to go to my validator. I'm going to use a CSS class. This is the right way to do it. CSS class is equal to alert dash danger, right? Save. My rating validator, that's just what it's going to come up with. This big thing that's going to come up and it's going to disappear, right? And then let's run it locally to see if it works okay. And when it runs okay, we'll upload it to GitHub and deploy it to Azure, and we're done for the day. Okay? I swear. I'm not going to make any more changes. Okay, maybe a review, and then we'll go. All right, so, and again, there's some other pieces that aren't done that I want you to do for next day. So -1. Oh, what happened? It worked, but it didn't work, right? So what happened here? Well, it did what I wanted it to do, but you know, it doesn't go away, and it didn't space out. This is nice, a nice idea, Tom, right? Truly a nice idea, but it really didn't do what I wanted it to do, right? So this isn't the solution. How do I fix it? Anyone have an idea? What you would do? I could use CSS. Let's go back here for a second. I could use CSS of my own, right? I was hoping to use something that's built into Bootstrap. Why not, right? This is nice, but what it does is it actually creates it kind of puts it and forces it down. I like the alert danger or whatever, but it kind of puts it, makes it quite large, right? Now there's other things we can do here, right? Like for example, links and alerts. Right, here's a link and alert. You can do other things that are in here that it talks about, but really nothing that really satisfies my requirements the way I see it, because they're all inside of a div tag, and I would have to put my validator in a div tag and give it a bit of a space, I would say, right? Like between the button, space out my button. That's another fix. My button and my age, I could space it out to give that space in there just in case it's going to pop up. Not a great solution, because that means I have to space all my other controls out to make sure that the validator is what it is. I could also make it so that I reformat my alert success so it's not as wide, it's not as high with my custom CSS. I could do that to fix it. So what I want to do is add the spacing is what I want to kind of do. Right? So let's go back in here. How do I add spacing? Well, the easiest way, of course, is to add some kind of break, right? Like a line break, or you can use CSS for that. I'm not going to use CSS right now, just to make it easy, just to give it a bit of a space. And I'll let you guys fix this on your end for next week. Let's kill some of these extra iterations. So you can see there's a bit of a space there to hold that line, right? Trick, Tom Smith. Oh, thank God, sure. And -1. And it's not still good, because even with my spacing, it kind of goes right on top of here. It's almost like hovering on top. I could create a little X. That's not going to solve it. What's really going to solve it here is if I change my value from -1 to like something like a reasonable value, then it should go away, right? But that's not really a solution. So really that fix isn't the right fix, okay? So I'm going to leave this to you. I want you to fix it. Right now, it's not for lab 1. I'm adding extra things here for lab 1 to make sure it works. We've still got a bit of a broken feature here that I would try and fix. I would probably do it with CSS. The other fix to make it really stupid easy is to add in a 4-color. Right? I don't recommend this fix because this takes away the CSS functionality, and I can type in something like 4-color, right, is equal to red, right, which just makes it a red color. Right? Let's run it again. Notice when I debug, I always set up another instance, right, which is good and bad. So here's again Tom and Vanguard. And my -1 again, and you can see now that it comes up as red, which is okay. Not really happy with it, right? Because I'm using 4-color, which is actually inline styling. I don't want to do that, right? But I can fix it if I fix it with a decent age, right? As an example, and I click submit, it's going to generate my results and check my age. So for now, let's leave it at that. There's other options, obviously here. Right? But user validation becomes quite complex depending on what you're asking the user for. Okay, that's it. Let's do an upload to GitHub so you have everything, and then away you go. Right? So I'm going to go back to my Team Explorer. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes, and I'm going to go to Stage all these changes. I'm going to say added age validator and simple style. Made changed, Home. And I'm going to go to sync, and I'm going to push. And these changes will be available live very shortly. Guys, thank you so much. Next week, remember that Lab 1 is due by midnight next week. I have to make it that way because of my 3rd class that doesn't have access to Blackboard. Also remember that next week, first thing we come into class, there'll be a short quiz, right? So please be early. Please be on time. It'll be a quiz around 5 questions, 5 to 7 questions or whatever on what we just talked about right now, out of a kind of a list of maybe 10 or 20 questions that I'll have as a pool of 20 questions. You'll get 5 or 6 of them to make it fair. It'll take the first 10 to 15 minutes of the class, and then we'll do the rest of the class, okay? So we're at 2% of your final mark. Guys, thank you so much. See you next week.